Good evening and welcome to the miNEStry. I am Archbishop Dracul, and alongside me is Father Avram. Our creed is to inspire our parishioners with reflections on the Nintendo Entertainment System. Tonight we are reflecting on Kid Icarus, a 1986 Japanese release for the Famicom Disk System that was developed and published by Nintendo, that was later released for the NES in North America in July of 1987. Nintendo's R&D 1 team was previously known for developing titles for the NES like Metroid, Mario Bros., and Donkey Kong. Tonight our guest is Heathen Psalm. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
A Testament to the Creators. Satoru Okada, director. He was also the chief director for Metroid in 1986, the director for Wrecking Crew in 1985, and also in 1985 he was actually an uncredited director for Balloon Fight.
Man, what a great game Balloon Fight is, and Metroid.
Mm-hmm. He was also the stunt double at the end of Boogie Nights.
Please proceed, Father Avram.
Toru Osawa, design and writing. He was also the script director for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time for the Nintendo 64. He did object design for Super Metroid in 1994 for the SNES, and the coordinator in 1990 for Game Boy's Balloon Kid. I don't know anything about Balloon Kid, actually, but the name sounds familiar to me.
Yeah, I don't know much about it either. Super Metroid is, there's what can you say about that?
It's super.
And Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, like, classic after classic being listed here. What a pedigree.
Yep, for sure.
Please proceed, Father Abram.
Hirokazu Tanaka, music and sound. He also, I think he did music and sound for all of these. I'm just going to list them. Balloon Fight. Tetris. And Metroid. I mean, no explanation needed there. There's so many classics on this list.
Yeah. And like such great music. Like,
yep.
Like that last track in Metroid where after you beat the Mother Brain, you're escaping the Mother Brain's lair, like you're climbing up that chute. Man, so well done.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so to be fair, I can't remember the Balloon Fight soundtrack at all.
It's very simple. It doesn't have very many tracks on it, I would say, like in the traditional sense. But like Tetris has fantastic music.
Yeah, well, they're all remakes of classics, right? Of like classical music, I think.
Not all of them.
Almost all of them, right?
There's one that's kind of has a watery soundtrack to it. You can definitely tell that it was the guy who composed Metroid.
Oh, interesting. I don't know if I've ever heard that one. I'm sure I have. I just can't recall it.
I think it was Type C, if I'm not mistaken. But Heathen Psalm, you have anything else to add?
I think you have to say something about like introducing classical music to the masses via a video game, right? Like who's not doing like the bam ba 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 dee da da do, right? Like how a lot. Imagine like all those kids that were introduced to that. I mean, you're not like sitting in the back of the school bus going like, you know what? I think I'm gonna listen to some Tchaikovsky. So I tip my hat to you, Mr. Tanaka.
The average of 3 official reviews put it at 63%. That to me is, after playing the game again after so many years, that to me is kind of low. This was pre-Nintendo Power, and we couldn't find any advertisement based on the NES game, so the only thing we were able to find was a commercial for the Famicom Disk System version. In this commercial, a man is playing Kid Icarus, and he gets turned to stone by Medusa.
That's horrifying.
That does seem kind of low to me, but whatever.
The rating, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say for an average of 63%, like that. What was the lowest rating? Do you remember, Archbishop?
I think it was like a 50.
Oh wow! So that means the high one wasn't even that much higher than 63. That means that what the highest one would have been
like high 70s. I think
76.
That's my average rating as a person, so I'll take it.
What alleyway did you find this street urchin from, Archbishop?
I was shucking some scallops down by the bay, and the Archbishop found me canoodling with a sloth.
You see? So don't judge, Father Avram. Let us now discuss the 7 categories for which we execute judgment on Kid Icarus. Category 1 is the narrative.
A reading from the manual. Let us go back to the distant past, to an age when the gods and man lived together in harmony. There was once a kingdom called Angel Land. This kingdom was ruled by 2 beautiful goddesses, Palutena, who administered light, and Medusa, who ruled darkness. Palutena lived in the palace in the sky and administered light so that man could live in happiness. And bathed in this light, man grew food and lived in peace. However, Medusa, the goddess of darkness, was different. Medusa hated mankind. She took great pleasure in drying up the crops that man took great pains to grow, and in turning people into stone statues. In her anger, Palutena changed Medusa into an ugly monster and banished her to the deep, dark underworld. For being changed into this ugly monster and forced to live in the underworld, Medusa promised to take over the palace in the sky where Palutena lived. So great was Medusa's anger that she joined forces with the monsters and evil spirits of the underworld, and Medusa's army soon began to surpass Palutena's army strength. Medusa led a surprise attack on Palutena's army, which could barely fend off the attack. Palutena's army suffered major losses and was heavily defeated in the final battle. What's more, Medusa's army took the 3 sacred treasures, the mirror shield, the arrow of light, and the wings of Pegasus, away from them. Almost all of the warriors in Palutena's army were turned to stone statues, and Palutena herself was imprisoned deep in the palace in the sky. The peaceful realm of Angel Land came to be inhabited by foul and terrible monsters, and was turned into a land of darkness ruled by the wicked Medusa. Locked in the depths of the palace in the sky, Palutena's strength was drained to its last. As a last resort, she sought the help of the angel youth Pit, who was being held prisoner, locked in a deep dungeon in the underworld. Pit was a valiant warrior who used to be in charge of Palutena's bodyguards. Armed with a bow and arrow brought to him through Palutena's magical strength, Pit attempted an escape from the underworld. The guard at this time was low in number, as Medusa's army had advanced to the palace in the sky. Pit succeeded in his escape to set out on his long adventure to rescue Palutena. Yet, to defeat Medusa, he had to get the 3 sacred treasures. Will Pit be able to restore Palutena's light and return it to Angel Land? Only you can answer that question. This is a reading from the manual. Praise be Nintendo.
So this is a very lengthy story for its time.
The longest one, I think, to date that we have covered.
Well, Deadly Towers does give it a run for its money, but it doesn't have the same rated G tone this does.
I loved this game. However, I did not read the manual. Nor did I know any of this story. I'm dead serious. I've beaten the game. And none of this I remember.
That is fantastic because it'll give us an interesting perspective on how you managed to do so. This game is difficult.
Very.
Like notoriously difficult.
But, I mean, the thing... I'm laughing because it's like you literally could play it, right? Like, other than, like, the maze section, right? It's pretty much like a platformer. You go up, right? So I didn't need to know the backstory. I just tried to get up.
Somebody really put a lot of effort into this backstory.
I know.
It's pretty well written, too. It's not like... It feels like you're reading, like some sort of, short story, kids novel type style.
Amazing.
This was the work of Toru Osawa, who was actually not... I don't know if he was credited as the game designer, but I don't know why he didn't come up as the main designer for this game.
I'm stealing this whole story from my profile. Change Pit to Heathen Sob.
Very much like Heathen. I never really knew the story either. I actually read the in-game story, which is shorter, from the title screen, if you let the title screen run.
Yeah.
It's much shorter. So I had some semblance of the story, but this is detailed. And so somebody took a lot of time to put this together. And after playing through the game and looking back at it, they did a pretty damn good job. Like they had the game actually, I don't know whether the story came first. I'm guessing it did. But the game design actually, and we'll get into this later, but the game design, just as it pertains to the narrative, really kind of fleshes out this story, which is which is really cool. I think it does not every game does that. Usually the story is just some sort of weird add-on that they've either written around the game or just some sort of like starting point that then they add a bunch of stuff to it.
You're absolutely right, especially back then. This came out a year after Kung Fu.
Yeah,
You know?
it's not surprising though, given that we're talking about the Metroid team. It's really not surprising.
Agreed. But, you know, what was this, 1986, right?
86, yep.
Yep. So remember being 86. I mean, arcades were still in fashion, right? I mean, they were kind of dying down, right? But arcades were still kind of a thing. And so, like, nobody's going to go in an arcade and expect, like, a whole backstory. So a lot of times, like, these games in, like, mid-'80s and stuff like that, like, stories like this weren't a very common thing. It was more about gameplay. Do you know what I mean? That would kind of pull the people into playing it. So the fact that somebody went in and made this huge backstory about this is just a credit to them and their detail.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but Nintendo isn't very well known for their like really in-depth stories to this magnitude, I would say back then. Like they were very short and to the point.
Just like me. Yes.
That's really, that's true, but I'd have to say honestly, I think Metroid had a pretty good story.
I would agree.
I mean, I think honestly, as far as like appeal, I kind of feel like this is on the same level. I think, in like the narrative, I'd say is on the same level as Metroid. But as far as like detail in the story, yeah, this actually takes one step further than Metroid, and that's just using Metroid as a comparison, right? Just because I think Metroid is probably I'd say one of the best written storylines on the Nintendo. So
I mean, it's in a class of its own, to be honest.
And it was the sister game to this actually. They were both they were both marketed as password packs. But we'll get into that during the box art and presentation. Let us move on. Let us proceed to category 2, which is audio. Known in Japan as Myth of Light, Palutena's Mirror, on the Famicom Disk System, the game was almost identical to this North American NES release, except the music was optimized to meet the limitations of the NES. The music is epic and has a lot of atmosphere. It even has small variations that I found during the Underworld, which was really cool. So you're not always listening to the same exact thing over and over again. Enemies moving to the beat of the music and the labyrinths were a nice touch. And I was a really big fan of the death sound effect. Like when you get hit, he does this little scream.
My legs are on fire.
But in the labyrinths, if his last hit point is done by a skewer, it holds in the first note. And he screams before falling off the screen. It's morbid as hell, but funny at the same time.
Little anecdote to that, as I think that the scream sound, if it's not the same, it's extremely reminiscent to the ghost sounds in Ghosts and Goblins.
It's much higher pitched than Ghosts and Goblins.
I don't know. It reminds me of it. I wonder if that was on purpose or if it was just some sort of weird programming accident.
It's got some dark humor to the game, for sure.
I really liked the music. the only music that I actually don't really like is the what is it? The challenge room music.
Yeah, I remember
It's
that.
very repetitive and very like droning.
Mm.
You know,
That's what the iron plates, right? That's what
the
you're
iron
talking about.
plates. Yeah, there's also like the little floating
Mustaches and
things that
eyeballs.
look the little mustaches. Yeah,
You know what's my favorite? Yes.
The Grim Reaper.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Archbishop pays attention to the heathen. Like, just my absolute favorite. I don't know why.
Grim Reaper's weird, man.
I'm gonna start using that in my daily life.
It's almost kind of like the Grim Reaper sound and like the sound choices there. It's almost like, correct me if I'm wrong here, but it feels like anime.
Well, the thing is, it's supposed to be an annoyance, and I think it does that successfully without actually like really annoying you. Like it's the thing. It's such a juxtaposition of the theme throughout the level, and then it's like the and then you're like, oh, you gotta like smite him. I just like I always liked it, but I mean I didn't like fighting them, but success to whoever composed the lovely notes to torment me while platforming upwards.
That would be Hirokazu Tanaka.
Praise Tanaka.
Let us proceed to category 3, which is gameplay.
A reading from the manual. Angel Land is divided into 4 worlds. Worlds 1, 2, and 3 each contain a fortress. Each world is cleared when Pit defeats the gatekeeper of the fortress. Pit's strength increases with the score at each area. Stage 1, Underworld. Stage 2, Overworld. Stage 3, Skyworld. Stage 4, Palace in the Sky. Chambers. Treasure chambers. These chambers contain 8 pitchers filled with treasure. Shoot the pitchers with the arrow, and the treasure appears. Remember, you need 5 hearts to break a pitcher. Enemy's lair. In some places, you won't be able to escape unless you completely destroy the enemy. Get as many hearts as possible in this chamber. Store. The shopkeeper will exchange goods for hearts. Black marketer. They may be expensive, but you can get your hands on some valuable goods. You can also use the credit card. Sacred chamber. A friendly god will give Pit arrows to increase his fighting power depending on how well Pit has been fighting. Sacred training chamber. In this room, a god will make Pit go through training. When he has completed this training, Pit will receive a weapon. Grin and bear this training. Good luck. Hot spring chamber. A dip in the hot spring will revive Pit's strength. Weapons. Fire flaming arrows. Sacred bow. And protective crystal. This is a reading from the manual. Praise be Nintendo.
So, for me, my gameplay pros, I only have one. The difficulty is hard but fair. The control is tight, so if you die, it's totally your fault for the most part. but there are some design decisions that cheapen the experience. And I have a pretty good list here of things I'll go through. The first 3 levels are absolutely brutal. The game actually has a reverse difficulty curve for the most part. During the climbing level, the screen scrolls up with you. Should you hit the bottom of the screen, you die, even if a perceived platform is just below it. Get the feather wherever you can on the climbing levels. I hate the fact that you can't duck without falling through the floor on certain platforms. Platforms that are not explained at all. You just do it sometimes and you'll fall through. It serves no purpose in the game, in my opinion. While extremely clever, I hate the eggplant wizards.
Mm.
The instruction manual even says turning into an eggplant is a, quote, fate worse than death. Apparently, Toru Osawa had an obsession with eggplants, but he ultimately created the eggplant wizard as a celebration of getting his summer bonus. It's like, I just got a shit ton of money. Now, how can I really fuck over the player in my game?
Wait, before you move on, I want to know what the connection is
I don't know the answer to
between
that question.
getting a bonus and doing an eggplant wizard. Like, is there some sort of cultural thing with eggplants that mean like money?
I don't know the answer to that question. Most of this information I got was from a 2012 article by NintendoWorldReport.com called Making of a Myth, The Grueling Development of the Original Kid Icarus by Devin Monins. We'll be referencing that a lot. Or I will be anyway. It is a good question. Like, is there some sort of a cultural connection between the two things? I don't know. Moving on with my cons, I also loathe the Pluton and the Pluton Fly bandits. You can't kill them, and one collision will result in one of your weapons being stolen for good if you have any. Sure, you can buy them back on the black market, but if you don't have enough hearts and the door closes once you leave, what's the point? It proves that the special weapons in the game are just nice to haves. And lastly, Hudra, the second fortress boss, is the hardest boss in the game. Far more troubling than Twin Bellows in the first labyrinth or Pandora.
Is that bouncing dragon guy?
Yeah, but there's a lot to talk about here. I mean, like going back to the reverse difficulty of the game, I found anyway that you really like the concept of grinding for hearts is very important during this time. Specifically in the very first and second level. Like when I was a kid, I didn't realize that you could power up in between levels because I wasn't trying to get hearts. I was just trying to get through the game. And once I read it in the manual that you can do that, you can power up, and I started grinding for hearts, the game opened up to me. And I don't know, it's just so strange how in a time when games were brutally difficult anyway, or are brutally difficult by default, they actually made it more difficult at the beginning than the end.
I'm still grinding for hearts.
I think I agree. Grinding is fun once you realize you need to do it, actually. I think once I realized it, like you said, the game opens up, and for me, I kind of like the grindy stuff. So, the game kind of went from a platformer to honestly more of like a character progressive type of feel.
Yeah, it had some RPG elements for sure.
Yeah. So I thought the grinding was really fun. I want to also agree that with the platforming being really tight, there are no infuriating jumps in this game. Once you figure out how to jump, sure, like some of the jumps can be challenging, but there's no jumps that are like, oh man, I can't get by this jump unless I do it perfectly. It just doesn't exist in this game. But what can really screw you up is that ducking and falling through platforms. And ducking is almost not even necessary.
Except for when those things come out of the ground and shoot at you.
But the flames?
Yeah.
But most of the time, it's just easier to either jump over them or just take it. You know. You also mentioned, at least I think you mentioned, or maybe you didn't. The labyrinths. The labyrinths in this game are very difficult to navigate. And the map pencil feather mechanic is freaking horrible.
You mean map pencil torch?
Yeah, sorry, map pencil torch mechanic is freaking horrible. It's like, even once you get the map, right? So you can't. It's useless without the pencil, because then that marks where you've been, and then the torch marks the current position that you're at on the map. But even with all of that, you still have to kind of remember your way, because there's no semblance of like walls and entrances or exits on that map. It just slowly becomes like a solid color of red, right?
Yeah. And you have to buy these things, which sucks.
Yeah, except for the map.
Except for the map. But you have to buy the torch and the pencil. And once you use them, they're only good for one labyrinth. You have to buy them again for each labyrinth.
Right. And they're generally pretty cheap. They're like 120 hearts or something like that. But still, yeah, it's once you actually start grinding stuff, the dungeons get easier as far as like surviving. But you still have to deal with the navigation, and then God forbid that you get smacked with an eggplant, because then you got to find the hospital. And once you get to the hospital, a floating head and shoulders of a beautiful woman removes the curse.
It sounds like my life. I got smacked with an eggplant, and I gotta go see a girl to reverse it.
The other thing I'd like to mention is I think the passwords are horrible. Very reminiscent of Metroid, except I think it's actually a little easier than Metroid, because Metroid has some very strange font with its characters that makes some of the characters really difficult to.
This one does too,
down.
though. This one has
it does, but it's not. It's not as bad. It's not as bad. I don't think. I really struggled with Metroid passwords.
Yeah.
But Kid Icarus, I can just, I can generally look at the characters and realize what I like. The biggest thing, really, is the 0 and the O, right?
Yeah.
That's the biggest thing, and always the biggest thing. It was the same thing with Metroid. But once you realize that the O is square and the 0 is oval, then you're okay. The other thing that really helps is that the lowercase letters are a different color, so there's no mixing up 1 and a lowercase l, for example.
I can't tell you how many times I've lost games because of these passwords.
Yeah, well, that's the thing, because you can recognize it on screen, but as soon as you write it down, you're going to write it down how you want, and then suddenly you write it down in an indistinguishable way, right? Because you decide to draw a 0 and an O the same exact way, and then you have no idea what you're looking at. And so that's the problem. That's why, with modern technology, taking a picture of the screen is the best way to do it, because then you don't have to worry about you messing up the password writing it down. You can just look at it later and put it back in. The bosses. I had no trouble with any of these bosses. The one that I had the most trouble with, that I actually died at, was Medusa at the end. Because I was trying to figure out the timing on dodging the projectiles and dodging the snake thing. And that was the most challenging boss. All the rest of them were cake as long as you just keep moving into your patient. Same thing with the dragon. Like the dragon, like once you actually can kind of tell where it's going, it basically just bounces around. It never really changes its direction or path or anything like that. So as long as you're comfortable with jumping and moving around from platform to platform, it was fine. And as long as you're patient. If you're really trying to kill him, then you're gonna have a hard time because you're probably gonna get hit a ton. Also, having the barrel with a bunch of potions really helps in this case as well.
Mm-hmm.
I really liked the items and grinding for the items. I thought, again, like once you realize that you can grind for these things, then suddenly you want to go into every door that you run into with as many hearts as possible. And it also makes you want to take on the challenge rooms. Because you realize if you can just get to the other side, then you'll end up better off. And you definitely will end up better off. Not only because you'll have more score at the end for a power-up, but you'll also have as many hearts as you need to buy the items that will keep you alive longer. So it really encourages you to play the game for I guess, more intensely than just sitting down for a half hour and, trying to speed run through the levels.
I think I saw a speed run that was like 19 minutes. I was like, how?
Yeah, I don't know.
Heathen Sam, would you like to chime in on anything we discussed up to this point?
Well, I would agree with everything the father has mentioned. But remember, we're looking back with a lens of playing modern games. Games like this. When
Do you have
the
something
earth was black.
stuck in your throat or something like that, Heathen?
It was the eggplant.
Oh, well, let me remove the eggplant curse.
Well, in fact, I see a beautiful young woman with just shoulders and a head. Anoint me. Free me of this burden, the eggplant. Anyways, I'll carry on. Games like this, like back then, right? So when they were making games like such as Kid Icarus, especially when they go back to when the Archbishop was referring to the platforming, like we would consider that a glitch these days. So how well they incorporated it into the gameplay made it a success. Other games of the time, like they're glaringly obvious. Do you know what I mean? So things like that some people would kind of ding Kid Icarus for. Like I would look at it and be like, oh, they successfully kind of like integrated a glitch into the gameplay. So you have to take that into consideration of the limitations of the programming and stuff like that. So that's just my 2 cents on the tight controls and the the platforming in itself. And to remark in it, like the grinding, the maps, and so like yeah, you could say it was like a mishmash of different gaming styles. Was it successful? I think so. One of my favorite games. In fact, I slept with it every night. I would blow into its little crevice, and I would tuck it under my pillow.
Okay, I think that we've heard enough of your NES cartridge exploits there, Heathen.
Fine.
Let us proceed to category 4, which is graphics. For me, the graphics are clean and everything has more character than most other games of the time. And the cons are everything is portrayed well except for the things in Skyworld that I used to call bladders. When I was a kid, I had imagined Pit getting pissed on causing damage. And my last con is I wish the Skyworld used a blue background like the Overworld did instead of black.
Well, the overworld, the side-scrolling levels, they all had that blue background, right?
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense though.
Well, isn't
Part
the
of the game,
vertical
too.
levels isn't that the underworld, or am I not
No, you're right.
about that?
Level 1 is the underworld. Stage 1 is the underworld. That's the first 3 levels. Then the fortress. Then you have the overworld, which is the 3 side-scrolling levels. Then their backgrounds are both blue, and I think the third one is black. And then you go to the climbing levels, and they're all black backgrounds. And that's supposed to be the sky world.
I mean, personally, I love games with black backgrounds. Like, I actually really do. Like, I think it makes everything so much cleaner, and makes your eyes focus on the things that matter. You know, everything else pops against it, and it's very appealing. It's very appealing.
Sam, do you have anything to say about the graphics?
I'm looking at it right now. I think it works. Like, you have to admit, like, look at their color palette. The clouds are blue. The undercut, like the shadows, are purple, right? So, what do? Make the sky red? That would kind of give the wrong kind of impression. Color's important. And it kind of adds to the, like, since it's a platformer, like you're going to fall off into the abyss, right? But why not make it black? I think it works.
I think it just allows them a lot more freedom to do things with.
Maybe I just if they never changed it to blue, I wouldn't have had a problem.
But like, also think of this, right? We have limitations with the colors and the technology of the time, and so playing this, I remember as a kid thinking like, black, like, specifically in the levels that are colored like black, like it allowed me to kind of imagine like an abyss. Like, you didn't take it so literal, the visual. Nowadays, we have to paint these worlds with all these graphics and everything. And, if it's real time graphics, like all of a sudden the mountain will pop up out of nowhere. Here, you're kind of concentrating on the platforming, the colorful little blue chickens that would whatever chase you. And it allowed for more internal, like, imagination.
I love shooting chickens.
Exactly. What is that thing? Does anybody know what that is to this day?
Supposedly it's a snake.
That's a snake?
A snake with wings, yeah.
Well, they say it tastes like chicken.
It tastes like chicken.
That's what they say.
I wouldn't want to eat a snake, but anyway. I want to add something else to the graphics. The bosses were kind of lame, in my opinion.
Yeah, they were.
I mean, I understand why they made the decisions that they did. Usually, on a technical aspect, like, you can't get like really awesome big bosses without doing some really interesting magic with tiles. It's basically constructing the boss with tiles, right? And then moving the background around. So
yeah, and this was an early game too, so all that sort of trickery hadn't been figured out yet.
Yeah, it just the bosses weren't really that awe-inspiring. However, all of the little critters, all of the monsters, all that stuff, everything is done. It's so charming. Like, everything has an appeal to it. There is nothing in this game that doesn't catch your eye in some way, shape, or form.
Agreed. Yeah. If I may make a remark, Your Holiness. Yes, the bosses did seem like an afterthought, but like, I think it's the type of game that, focused more on the platforming and the puzzles and the maps. And like, that's what the driving force behind this title, so it's like, what do? They had to give you some fruit to like go to the arduous jumping of clouds, and maybe perhaps they fell short. But like you were alluding to, as a whole, a wonderful game, charming. colorful, delightful.
Yeah, even just for graphics alone, this is definitely a game that I will continue to come back to throughout my life.
And I'll say again, there is so much character in the graphics. There is so much character in everything. It's so well done. And like back then, that was a huge breath of fresh air.
Oh yeah, because we've definitely been inundated with some shit.
Yes.
What? Give for an example. The heathen needs an example.
Deadly Towers.
Deadly Towers.
Okay, the heathen agrees. The heathen agrees. That was a turd.
I love how we both said that at the same time.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a love-hate relationship with that fucking game.
Point taken. Point taken. But I mean, I'm just gonna, like I told, the Archbishop here. This is one of my favorite games, so I may be a little biased.
It's actually one of my favorite games too. And again, there's a reason.
Everything to do with the graphics, honestly. Like it's just like how many pixels makes up Pit?
I think he's probably 2x2 tiles. I think so, 16x16.
It's just I was enamored with the whole style of it. Like I said, so much so didn't even read the backstory. I was just like back then. It was like if it looked good, I wanted to play it.
And there's a lot of variation too. There's a lot of variation in the maps.
The color palette alone.
Yeah, like there's so many Nintendo games out there that just do like maybe 3 or 4 tiles for an entire level, right? But this game, there's variation all over the place. And you see it progress as you go through the level. Like the level will change as you go through the level. The only exception to that usually is the labyrinth, which tends to be more consistent. But even in there, you can go into different sections and suddenly the labyrinth looks different. So just everything, the way they handled everything in this game with the graphics is just, especially for the time when it was made, just amazing.
Agreed.
I also agree. Let us proceed to category 5, which is box art and presentation. So, to me, the box art is fantastic. It's almost identical to the original NES black box designs, except they ditched the Starfield background for a solid silver color. Marketed along with Metroid as a password pack. I love it. I keep going back to that day in January of 1988 when I was in Woolworth in the North Dartmouth Mall. And I had 3 games on the table. I had Metroid, Kid Icarus, and Chubby Cherub. Thank God I didn't choose Chubby Cherub.
Yeah, that would have been a tragedy.
But it came down to Metroid or Kid Icarus. And the funny thing is even though I didn't buy Kid Icarus that day, I rented it constantly. It was like always in our house growing up.
So I would like to applaud the fact that they didn't use the Starfield here. What was the last game we just did that had the Starfield that I didn't like?
Kung Fu.
Kung Fu, that's right, yeah. So when they used the Starfield on Kung Fu, I was like, what the hell is this? This doesn't make any sense. If they had used the Starfield here, it would have been the same thing. It would have been like, what the hell is going on here? So I love the fact that they didn't use the Starfield here. Why didn't they remove it for Kung Fu? I don't know. But either way, the box art's very clean. I don't see all of the fudging of the pixels as mentioned with some of the other black box games. Technically, it's a gray box game, right? it's part of the black box series, I think, but it's actually not a black box, right?
Well, the black box series was the launch titles. This isn't a launch title.
Oh, I thought it was. Okay, my bad. But yeah, so I don't know. It's going back to this with some of the other NES titles. They fudged the graphics as mentioned in the previous episode with Kung Fu. They had like smearing. They added extra pixels. If they did that in here, which they probably did, they didn't do it at a noticeable level. Everything's very square. Everything's very clean. There's no smudges. I think, other than the fact that maybe some things are at some interesting angles, I think they like rotated Pit a little bit. It's not a horrible cover. As far as fudging the graphics is concerned. I like the screenshot selections that they used in the back. Everything's really formatted well. I kind of wish that they had put one boss on the back.
Yeah, that would have been
I feel
cool.
like that would have. I think that would have been a lot. A boon, as it were.
And may I just say, we were gonna read the back of the box, but it was very similar to the story. So to save time, we decided against it.
Yep. So that's that. That's pretty much all I have to say about box art and presentation.
Who wouldn't get excited when you walk into Child World and see this box art? It's very nostalgic, very on brand for Nintendo.
Let us proceed to category 6, which is Fun Factor. So the game for me offers a variety of gameplay unseen on the NES at the time, a hybrid of Metroid and Zelda. And it doesn't take itself too seriously. For instance, there was a credit card in the game, which was a fantastic idea, but it completely broke the theme as a pop culture reference.
How do you even get the credit card?
You have to get it, I believe, by winning the treasure room and not getting the God of Poverty.
Oh, that's right. I've just never done that.
What do you think Kid Icarus' credit rating is?
I don't know.
I think he's above a 750.
The enemies are rather quirky. Specno's design was inspired by the game's composer Hirokazu Tanaka's large nose. There's a jellyfish called Mick that has a large, iconic mouth, which I figured was Mick Jagger from the Rolling Stones. And the Kamaito in Skyworld are Metroids. The manual even says they came from another planet.
No.
Yeah.
What?
Mini games like God of Poverty Room, which we mentioned, and the training rooms give a nice gameplay variety throughout. And the little things like bartering with the shopkeepers using the A and B on the second controller is a fun little gameplay mechanic. I don't have any cons for Fun Factor for this game. I never had a problem playing this game.
The only thing that really kills the enjoyment, but once the only thing that kills the enjoyment is falling through the platforms when you don't mean to, but that as soon as you train yourself out of that, it's fine.
Yeah.
I think that's part of the fun. Like, I can remember it being hard, but not so hard that you would like snap the controller over your 12-year-old knee, Like, now games are way too easy, look pretty, and not as fun. Why? Too easy. So the balance, like they achieved with this title, a piece de resistance. The sprinkles on my Sunday.
Very nicely put. Let us proceed to our last category, which is technical. I never encountered sprite flickering. I don't know. Did you gentlemen encounter sprite flickering ever?
Not in this game. Down an alley, maybe.
Not that if there was, it wasn't noticeable.
Yeah. The cons. We are going to touch on something we never have touched upon on the miNEStry, which is the development process. As I said earlier, I will be referencing the article Making of a Myth, the grueling development of the original Kid Icarus by Devin Monans. And it was written in 2012, and it was about the journey that Toru Osawa took to make this game. And I'm gonna read. I basically truncated some parts down, but it's mostly paraphrase. Toru Osawa created the game design document, character sprites, and had walking and shooting mechanics working when he brought the game to an outside company called TOSE for testing. TOSE. He felt neglected by Nintendo and was developing his game single-handedly until August of 1986 when Yoshio Sakamoto and Nintendo's R&D 1 team joined the project after completing Metroid, where they spent 3 months in development hell in order to meet the December 19th deadline. People were pulling all-nighters and sleeping under their desks on collapsed cardboard boxes. Nintendo turned off the heat in the autumn months.
So hold on, wait. So this game right here set the precedent for the blight of crunch time that has plagued the video game industry to this day.
As we know it. We don't know how many other companies were doing that beforehand. I assume they were all doing it. So they had a December 19th deadline. On December 16th, Osawa was told if it doesn't have any bugs, it's finished. There was no time for the creation of a staff role in the Famicom Disk System version, despite Osawa's pleas. The North American release in 1987 received a staff role, but Osawa was left off of it.
What?
Yep.
Insanity.
I know, man. I don't like to hear that kind of thing about a game I love so much. Moving on, the last level was added at the very last minute to surprise the players, or according to the article. It certainly does feel like an afterthought. A looping level unless you kill 50 enemies. Give me a break. It's minutia. I'd much rather have been a single screen boss fight.
This is really interesting to me because I'm so glad you brought up the last level. Because I was gonna say with technical for me, and we can get back to the article in just a second, but it's a good place to interject what I was gonna say in my piece, which is there's so much variation in this game. I mean, I said it with the graphics. You know, you have a labyrinth level where you're going, like becomes like Zelda, right? You're going from room to room. You can go up, down, left, or right. There's vertical levels where you're climbing platforms. There's side-scrolling levels, and then you have this side-scrolling shoot 'em up level at the end. Can I just take a moment to say this is almost a totally different game? It's like they coded a whole new game.
Mhm.
I know that's not really true in some regards. Like, you know, they reused some enemy sprites and stuff like that. But the engine driving the level is totally different. It's gotta be. It's auto-scrolling. The controls are different. The different player character. You know, everything is different about this level. There's no platforming. There's no jumping. It turns into a shoot 'em up, and so it's like they just added a whole new game at the end of this one.
Yeah, new player sprite too.
Yeah, a lot simpler. Granted, not really any animation, other than the wings, I think, right? But still,
I have two more cons. I experienced slowdown from time to time, specifically when the Reapets appeared after aggravating the Reaper.
yep, I experienced that too.
And the collisions are a tad wonky. I would sometimes land in the middle of a platform when I jumped up. And some people use that during their speed runs to actually go through walls and stuff. It's pretty crazy. There's also no clear distinction as to when you get hit from things like the thorns when you're climbing. The thorns that stick out of the walls when you're climbing.
Yep. I noticed one of the wonky things about the collision that I'm grateful for is that the arrow seems to be a lot bigger than what it actually is. So you can hit something that is lower than your arrow, for example. And without that, that would have made the game so much harder.
Yeah, I agree.
Let us proclaim the hints and cheats of our game.
A reading from the manual. Questions and answers. What should I do to get extra strength to increase my maximum endurance? You get stronger at each checkpoint you pass through if your score exceeds a certain level. In other words, you must get a high score, dummy. Oh, Heavenly One, when will you give me the arrows for extra fighting power? Let me tell you, how many of the enemy have you killed? How many chambers have you entered? Have you got a lot of items? And how little damage has the enemy inflicted upon your flesh? These all decide the answer to your question. Cute little man. Why can't I use my weapons? Sometimes you can't use them because you haven't got enough strength. Drink creatine. How can I get to Medusa's chamber? Well, Pit, you must fight fiercely and win many battles. My weapon was stolen by Pluton in Pluton Fly. What can I do to get them back? You might try bargaining with the Black Marketeers. Can I look forward to anything special once I've rescued Palutena? First, you have to rescue her. But once you have, many different endings await you depending on how skillful you have been. A reading from the manual.
Praise be Nintendo.
GameFAQs.com also has passwords for each level as well as every ending variation. I think there's 5 of them or something like that.
Oh, really? I thought there were only 2.
No, there's apparently you could be a farmer or
What?
you could even turn into one of those nose characters that, depending upon how poorly you do in the game.
Oh, wow.
You can go on to become a telemarketer or perhaps a podiatrist. That's my favorite ending. I like the fact I could also become an OBGYN.
And now, brethren, let us offer each other the body of price. So game prices then and now. According to the 1988 Sears Wish Book, Kid Icarus was originally $39.99. And just for perspective, according to data.bls.gov CPI inflation calculator, $39.99 in 1988 is worth approximately $104.23 in 2024 today.
Exactly what's in my bank account.
That's
And you would gladly spend it on Kid Icarus.
I would actually.
I could not imagine spending that amount of money on this game now today. But I mean, that's the weird thing about these types of things. But okay, anyway, moving on. According to pricecharting.com, today the prices are a little different. A loose copy, cart only, $24.99. Box only, just the box, $91.32. Is that actually? Is this the most expensive box that we've had to date? I don't know if it is.
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Okay, here we go. So manual only, $14.22. That's pretty average. Complete in box, $132.47. I'm just surprised the box is this much. But the brand new sealed in box, I think this might actually be the most expensive game we've ever covered. $44,744.18 for a sealed copy, brand new in box of this game.
I can kind of believe that. The simple reason is that day I saw Kid Icarus in the store. I never saw it again after that.
It's interesting because you kind of expect these types of prices for launch titles because launch titles, everybody's opened the game. So how many copies sealed must there be, right? But this kind of throws that on its head a little bit.
Yeah, it's pretty staggering. Let us now execute judgment upon Kid Icarus and decide which of the 7 cardinal sins it has committed. Father Avram, in regards to narrative, what is your final judgment?
In regards to narrative, Kid Icarus has committed no fault.
Heathen Psalm, in regards to narrative, what is your final judgment?
No fault has been seen.
Very well. In regards to narrative and in the presence of this assembly, Kid Icarus has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to audio, what is your final judgment?
In regards to audio, Kid Icarus has committed no fault.
Heathen Psalm, in regards to audio, what is your final judgment?
In regards to audio, Kid Icarus has no fault. In fact, quite a few bangers. I like to play this while I'm in the shower.
In regards to audio and in the presence of this assembly, Kid Icarus has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to gameplay, what is your final judgment?
In regards to gameplay, Kid Icarus has committed no fault.
Heathen Psalm, in regards to gameplay, what is your final judgment?
In regards to gameplay, Kid Icarus played with me more than my father. I see no fault.
In regards to gameplay and in the presence of this assembly, Kid Icarus has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to graphics, what is your final judgment?
In regards to graphics, Kid Icarus has committed no fault.
Heathen Psalm, in regards to graphics, what is your final judgment?
In regards to graphics, Kid Icarus, such a beautiful game, pretty colors, no fault.
In regards to graphics and in the presence of this assembly, Kid Icarus has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to box art and presentation, what is your final judgment?
In regards to box art and presentation, Kid Icarus has committed no fault.
Heathen Psalm, in regards to box art and presentation, what is your final judgment?
In regards to box art and presentation, unlike my student loans, there is no fault.
In regards to box art and presentation, and in the presence of this assembly, Kid Icarus has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to fun factor, what is your final judgment?
In regards to fun factor, Kid Icarus has committed no fault.
Heathen Psalm, in regards to fun factor, what is your final judgment?
In regards to fun factor, just like the tickle fight in summer camp, Kid Icarus, there is no fault.
In regards to fun factor and in the presence of this assembly, Kid Icarus has been spared. Father Avram, in regards to technical, what is your final judgment?
In regards to technical, Kid Icarus has committed no fault.
Heathen Psalm, in regards to technical, what is your final judgment?
In regards to technical, because I couldn't even hold a paper plane at the time, Kid Icarus receives no fault.
In regards to technical and in the presence of this assembly, Kid Icarus has been spared. Clean sweep. Gentlemen, if you have a talisman, play it now.
I invoke the talisman of absolution.
Father Avram has invoked the talisman of absolution. For what category?
I invoke the talisman of absolution for the category of graphics.
In order for the talisman to be used, someone must second that invocation.
I second it.
Very well. Kid Icarus, by the authority vested in me, we redeem you of any faults which you have committed, and hereby revere you as a jewel in the crown of the Nintendo Entertainment System. This concludes tonight's service. Remember, our liturgy does not simply come to an end. Those who assembled are set forth to bring the fruits of the ministry to the world. Join us next month for Galgo 13 with Christopher.